I wanted to think about this passage that Kath read for us. It's one that probably touches many of us. As she read about, the foundations of the earth will be shaken, there'll be fires and floods, and those sort of words and those passages that are in the Bible that talk about things going wrong in the world around us, I think particularly at this time tend to strike a chord with us. I had a conversation with my neighbour yesterday, and I went over just to borrow a ladder, and his opening words were, because he was, I busted up a conversation with the two neighbours, and he said, "Oh, we're just having a grizzle." And I said, "Oh, okay." He said, I said, "What about?" And he said, "Oh, the whole world's gone crazy." And so he went on to explain what he meant by that. But I think in some ways there's a sentiment that we could all have our own versions of, a little bit of a whinge or a worry about what we see going on in the world around us and how that can trouble us and make us question what's going on. Jesus, I guess, is tapping into that. In this passage, he's talking to his disciples and he says, when you see those things happening, they're like looking at a tree and knowing that as it puts on its new leaves, that soon summer's coming. He said, these things are a sign to you that the kingdom is coming. It's an interesting way to tackle it, isn't it? He points to our own ability to realise and to know that something is just around the corner. A bit like an advent calendar up the back there. Maybe if you don't have kids in your household this year, do one for yourself. Do one for your partner. Put an advent calendar up anyhow and anticipate the coming of Christ. Knowing that it's not just Christmas Day, knowing that it's not just in the coming year or the new year, it's every day. Every day Christ comes to us. Every day there's an opportunity for us to meet Christ in our world. Even in the stuff that we see happening in the news. There's an interesting, I guess it's a saying, that only two things in life are certain, death and taxes. I think it's supposed to be a joke. I'm not sure what's funny about it, but that also is tapping into something that Jesus is picking up on here. That one thing is certain about every life, that it comes to an end. Every life comes to an end at some stage. But what he's pointing to is that at the end of life, beyond what we know to be certain, is God. It's God's kingdom. Now Jesus said about himself, "I am the door." But we don't stop at that. We don't arrive at the door of a friend's house and just stand there. Usually we ring the button or we knock on the door or we call out and we actually go in. Jesus says, whoever believes in me believes not just in me but in the one who sent me. You see, Jesus coming to us was not the end. Jesus coming to us was actually pointing to God. Jesus came that we might see God in him. And that's important. He said, "I am the way." And it's not just that we travel on the way, but we also have a destination. Now that destination is to be with God in heaven. And so when we live our lives under God's lordship, we can live expectantly. We can live confidently, knowing that what we do in our everyday living matters, that what we do counts, that with every encounter we have an opportunity to be building something of the kingdom of God. And that's important. And that's an everyday occurrence. And we should be excited about that. We should have our eyes open, looking for those opportunities. The other part of that wonderful promise Jesus gives us all is that we can be confident. Confident when, I guess, everything we know, our lives and all we've done, are undone by death or turned on its head by death. He says that there's something more. That even beyond that, there is God that we come to. There was a verse in one of the songs that we sang earlier. Heaven is our home. Heaven is our home. Do we believe that? As Christians, we're called to believe that we belong with God. And we make it possible wherever and however we can here in this life. But after life, we believe that that is our home. That we become fully present to God. And that that's a joyful thing. And so Jesus wants to sort of put that context into these fears that his disciples have. Their anxieties as they look around themselves. And he predicts, I guess, so much trouble in the world physically around them. He points them to that reality. That you have another home. And it's with God. And it's better than all of this. These things can be a reminder. These things can be a reminder that we want to be making this place as divine as we can. We want to establish God's kingdom everywhere and every way. In every relationship we can. And after, we know that we have a relationship with God that is beyond all of these relationships. These are actually words of great encouragement for times just like these, when your neighbour says to you, the whole world's gone crazy. What's your response going to be? Do you respond with, oh yes, I'm afraid about all of that and those things worry me too? Or will you stop and say, yeah, but hang on, there's two responses to that. One is out of fear, one is in hope. One is in faith that says, A, I have a job to do here and now that's polar opposite to the acts of terrorism. And I'm going to set about those, not worrying about, acts of terrorism or fires or whatever it might be, sickness and death. Those things that work towards death, I'm going to be working against them in every way I can. That's the first thing. The other thing is that I know death is not the nullifying of life. Death for me as a faithful person is not a stop on life and everything that it meant. But rather, we make a statement of faith and say, no, death is a doorway into my relationship with God, becoming perfected. Becoming all that I've hoped it to be. All that I've been working towards my whole life, whether it's long or short. I guess Jesus wanted to encourage his faithful followers in those two things, the here and the now and the after. So when your neighbour says to you, the whole world's gone crazy, what response do you have? Do you become fearful? Do you jump on their bandwagon and go, yeah, I'm really worried? Hopefully, if you do, it's only for a short time. And faith starts to kick in. And that knowledge of God and the promises that he makes to you hopefully kick in also. That hope and faith are the answer, or the way that you answer not just that question, there, but also in your living. That's the challenge. I wanted to just finish with that image. If heaven is our home, are you homesick? Are you longing for it? I don't know if anybody's been homesick. I'm hoping you have. I'm hoping if you could just take a moment, think of a time when you really felt homesick. Either because you were away from, the people and the place that you just loved. I remember as a young person feeling the first time I felt really homesick was driving home after about a 4-week holiday, and we'd been everywhere and moving every night. We bunked down, and then every morning we packed up and put everything in bags and we drove on to the next place. It was wonderful and exciting, but as we drove up the hills, a bit like coming into Perth, you get to the hills coming in and there's that descent down into your home, and you're finally able to rest in the place where you are, where you belong. It was a bit like that. And I got just before the peak of the mountains, the hills in Adelaide, and I wanted to just cry because I was so close, but I knew it was still about 40 minutes away, and I just wanted to be home. Can you relate to that? Can you relate to maybe getting there, arriving and just going, I'm here. Thank goodness, it's been a long time. And just sort of melting into a couch or your favourite chair or whatever it is, just that everything seems to fall away and you feel at peace. Heaven is our home. And Jesus is attempting to reassure or answer that question for his disciples, answer that fear and anxiety that they had when they looked at what was going on in the world around them. That's really no different to what we see when we look into the Middle East. That's where they live, just like that. And he says, but you should be homesick for heaven. You should be longing for it. You can't wait for it. Just knowing that when you get there, it's this almighty divine relax and go thump into your favourite armchair, only a million times better. He says that is the answer to your fear, to your worry and to your anxiety. Is know that heaven is your home. Your answer is not one of fear or anxiety, but your answer to those questions is faith and it's hope. And if you have those things, then you'll also know peace and you'll know joy. That's what this season is all about. Knowing those things, not just saying them, but living them. Jesus really wanted his people to live them. And so he points to something really obvious that they could all tangibly understand. He says, see this tree, now it's putting on its leaves, these fresh green shoots. You know that summer's coming. And when you see something like that, you know that the kingdom is near. He said, stand up, hold your heads high. People of faith, hold your heads high. Because you know, when you see those terrible things happening, that your salvation is near at hand. Praise be to God.